Welcome back to the channel, everyone. It's time that we start off the NFL offseason the right way. This is about my fifth or sixth time actually attempting to make my mock draft. It's just a variety of things have happened within this process, but today I feel pretty confident about what we have here. So guys, consider dropping a like on the video and consider subscribing. We're on the road to 10,000 subscribers. And like I said, you're going to see mock drafts such as this one. You're going to see me reacting to mock drafts, and you're going to see 7-round mock drafts of your favorite team coming up in this offseason. But today, we got a good one because I know up to this point, this won't be the first mock draft that you see, and it won't be the last that you ever see. But I think that we've probably been conditioned to look at a mock draft one way. We've probably been conditioned to think a certain team should take a certain player at a certain selection. However, I want us to focus on the conversation today. What is the logic? Not so much what player did I take at a certain spot, why did I take that player, and does it make sense? That's what I want us to talk about today. So before we get into this fully, I want us to delegate the quarterbacks. I think when you look at this draft, there will be no trades in this mock draft. So when you look at that, you have to say, okay, who has a quarterback and who doesn't as we get into this first round. I have Kirk Cousins retaining with the Vikings. I have Justin Fields going to the Falcons, Russell Wilson going to the Steelers, and Baker Mayfield staying with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So the Vikings, Falcons, Steelers, and Buccaneers will have quarterbacks in this iteration of the mock draft. Now let's get it started. Number one, I'm taking Caleb Williams for the Chicago Bears. I think when I look at the NFL draft, evaluation of all of these players, and particularly these quarterbacks, Caleb Williams is by far the best to me. And I think for really not even consensus, but when you evaluate a guy like Caleb Williams, 6'1", 215, you could add him into your running game. He can make every throw. He can use every inch of grass on the football field. He can throw with anticipation. And when guys are open, he can throw with touch, and he can change up the pace on the throw. This is what you talk about when you say franchise quarterback. Now, I think for me, he didn't win as much as you would like this season at USC, but you have to think, okay, in some of those situations, you have to press a little bit more when you're playing with a defense that doesn't get as many stops. Now, really, the biggest thing for me with Caleb Williams is going to be how does Shane Waldron take away some of those turnovers, but maximize the strengths of a guy like this. You have to let him play free. You have to let him play his brand of football. And I think just stepping back away from it, I feel that Justin Fields, there's still an opportunity that the Chicago Bears could trade out of this pick. For this mock draft, they don't. And there will be future mock drafts where they possibly will. But when I look at it for this certain scenario, I say, okay, you reset the quarterback clock. That's the big thing. You have all of that talent on defense. You got to pay Jalen Johnson. Please pay him. He's a top corner in this game. But I'm thinking if you do that, and you have some of those pieces on offense. You have DJ Moore. You have some of those guys on the offensive line. Now you say we have a quarterback on a rookie contract scale. He's not getting paid like these top guys getting $50 million annually. You feel really good about that. Like I said, you have Shane Waldron. He's coming over from Seattle. He's the new offensive coordinator here. This would have been Fields' third play caller, Matt Nagy, Luke Getsy, now Shane Waldron. And I just think it's more room for leisure with Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus. I think if you retain Fields, the seat gets a little bit hotter because people are looking around and saying, okay, now you made a decision, which a lot of people may not agree with. And if it doesn't work, how will that look on Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus? Like I said, I still think they could, but right here, I don't have them doing that. Number 2, Washington Commanders. I'm going Drake May. And I think when we talk about evaluating these guys, sometimes we get a little bit too nitpicky. When I watch Drake May, I see a guy who's still in that same one tier, but he's just a little lower than Caleb Williams. He can make those throws, and I really like how he throws the football across the middle. Now, of course, another guy, like I say, pressing a little bit in some of those games for UNC. He didn't have the best supporting cast when you talk about receivers and offensive line. A lot of people are talking about Devontae Walker, how he had to get his waiver. He couldn't play for the full season, only played about 7 or 8 games. So now you're saying, okay, this is a guy who has all of these tools, had a lot of production the year before this one. Now we say, if we get Cliff Kingsbury, have Dan Quinn. He's the head coach. He's going to work with the defense. I think this is a team that needs a quarterback, and this is my second-ranked quarterback in this NFL draft. Not going to give the full analysis here, but like I said, when I look at some of these guys, Drake May has a lot of things that I really like, and that's why I have him going there at number 2. You also think about some of the weapons he's going to have. Brian Robinson Jr., Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson. They could retain Curtis Samuel, but he's up for free agency, and they still have Logan Thomas. Like I said, this is potentially a trade back spot, or If in their evaluation they like Jayden Daniels a little more, like I said, I really like Daniels. We're going to get to Daniels, but I just don't like him more than Drake, man. I'm going to talk about some of those reasons why as we get into this video. Those are two possibilities I could also see. Now, number three, and this is where I say, okay, some people take the mock draft a little too seriously because I don't know what these teams are fully going to do. Like I said, I could do my film research on these players. I could do my analysis on the team needs. But at the end of the day, these general managers will shake a lot of things up. I go back to last year's draft. I thought for sure the Seattle Seahawks were going to take Peter Skoronski. They go out there and get Devon Witherspoon, a very good player, but I just did not see them making that selection right there at number 5 last year. So with this number 3 overall pick, two things I think. The New England Patriots are third in cap space per spot track. When you look at the quarterback conversation, there's only one guy who I believe is in the conversation as a quarterback right here, and that's Jayden Daniels. You have to say with the talent surrounding this team, Kyle Duggar, you have to bring him back. He's on the defensive side of the ball. You look at some of the guys on the offense. Trent Brown, he's going to have to get paid at the right tackle position. I think this is a shaky offensive line. I think this is a team that is void of weapons. But when you look at the cap space, I feel like your best option may be to build around a guy like Jayden Daniels. You have to think, if you bank on, okay, we build the team around Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think is the best player left on my board right here. He's the blue chip guy. Some people will quote him as a can't miss. Some people quote him as a generational prospect. He does a lot of things that I love at the receiver position. But I say the only way that I could see that possibility of it is if you think that Bo Nix or JJ McCarthy, or even Michael Penix Jr., whoever you evaluate the most and whoever you like the most, you think they'll be there in that late first round. You get Marvin Harrison Jr. and you trade back up. There's no trades in this iteration of the mock draft, so I'm not ruling that out as a possibility. But I think right here, if you have to put your feet to the fire, if you make the third overall selection, I feel this is Jayden Daniels. Like I said, a quarterback who I like, and you have to say right now, the cupboard is pretty bare for what he can do around them. But you say, now this is a guy who we know has a great deep ball. He can throw with accuracy down the football field. Didn't throw across the middle a lot. Had Brian Thomas Jr. on one side, had Malik Nabers on one side, but we think about what he adds in the multiplier he is in the running game. He's not going to juke you, do a lot of spin moves. He's going to take the quarterback draw. He's going to take the sweep, take the power, and go. This is a guy who I expect. I doubt he runs a 40, but I think just looking at the tape, he's a 4-4 guy. So you're having that at the quarterback position. A lot of people have the Kyler Murray comp, but still, I really, really like Jayden Daniels. My question is, 6'4", 210, 215, slender build, having to stay healthy. Takes a lot of big hits. You can go to Alabama, you can go to Ole Miss. Some of those games where you say, you got to get down there. But when he gets into the running game, when he scrambles, he turns into a complete runner. And while that can be one of his greatest strengths, it can also be one of his greatest weaknesses. So I think Jayden Daniels is a very good prospect. If you draft him right here, like I have you draft him in this iteration of the mock draft, I think you use that cap space. You have trade partners, or you can go in the free agency, build a collection of receivers. You're probably not going to get that number one receiver because you're looking at Mike Evans, T. Higgins. It's going to be hard to bring in one of those guys. But if you can get a collection of guys who have really skill sets which work together in your receiving core, I feel really good about that. Now, number 4, let's not waste too much time. Marvin Harrison Jr. paired with Kyler Murray, paired with Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson, what they have there. What is the plan with Hollywood Brown? Will they retain him? James Conner, what is the plan there? A couple of questions, but I think the biggest thing is, okay, we get Kyler Murray, his guy. Now, with Jonathan Gannon, I think we've seen it's just been a whirlwind from a team who a lot of people had getting Caleb Williams to now feeling very confident in Kyler Murray and giving him a number one receiver, a bona fide X who can fight against the press, who can give you that consistent first down level production. I really like this move for this team, and I don't think Marvin Harrison Jr. needs an introduction at this point in the offseason. Now, number 5, this is where it gets a bit tricky because you can say a couple of things. You can say, okay, and to get to some of my notes. Now, I think about Jim Hortz as the new GM for this team. He's worked with the Baltimore staff since 1998. He's seen a lot of Baltimore football. And what do we think about when we think about Baltimore football? We think about those trenches. Who is their new head coach? Jim Harbaugh. And because of that, Also, who is their new offensive coordinator? Greg Roman. A lot of people look at Brock Bowers in this position, and I think it's a very good route to take when you think about all of these 12 personnel sets, all of these 13 personnel sets, even an 11 personnel. But also, he's a guy who can play in line, but he can also flex out and serve as that big slot in your offense. That would be great for Justin Herbert. But I don't want to stop right there. I want to think about some other scenarios. Joe Alt, offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. He's a guy that you have to think about because he's the best tackle in this class. And when you talk about a team, you have Trey Pipkins on one side, you have Rashawn Slater. Joe Alt is a left tackle, but do you feel comfortable about he or Rashawn Slater moving to that right tackle position? That's something you have to think about. Then I think also we look at those receivers. Malik Nabers is my second-rated receiver in this class, so I would have to say, what weapon do you like the most, or do you just want to get that bookend tackle? And the more that I look at it, I've been kind of pro Brock Bowers in this spot, but I think the more that I kind of look at this spot, Malik Nabers, really high ceiling in this offense if you bring him into this team. You think about Keenan Allen, he's the quasi number one, can do a lot of things for you, can work inside, outside. Malik Nabers, he can also work inside, outside. The year before this one, 2022, had a lot of reps in the slot. So I'm saying, with the versatility of a guy like that who can get down the football field, who's electric after the catch if you just get the football in his hands, if you pair that for Justin Herbert, I think with the depth of this class, when I think about some of those tackles and some of those offensive linemen down the road, I feel like right here getting the playmaker is what I would do in this selection. If you want to get Joe out, get the book in, I have no problem with that. But I really, really like the tackle depth in this class. I think there's about 10, even the 12, 13 guys who could start for an NFL team by 2024 season. So I have Malik Nabers going right here. Really, really like the move. And for me, this also becomes a question. When we have the Evan Neal conversation, a lot of the things that we've seen thus far with the New York Giants, Evan Neal wants to play right tackle. And of course, you can't make this pick as an emotional decision. It's not about what Evan Neal wants. It's about what can help the football team the most. You have a booking on the left side of Andrew Thomas. If you draft Joe Alt, you move him to right. Obviously, you still have Andrew Thomas, or you find out which one you like at right tackle more. That's a conversation you have. But I have to say, for the New York Giants, that void of just a number one receiver, a guy that can go get it. When you think about that, you say, okay, Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, Darren Waller, Wandale Robinson, he's your do-it-all guy in the slot. Jalen Hyatt, I think you want to put him in the slot as well, give him some looks there. So now you're looking at, okay, trips, 2x2. Those types of sets with receivers now shielding off some of these guys to create better matchups because you don't have somebody who can consistently win. Who do I feel can consistently win on the perimeter for a football team like this? And then I think about the depth of this tackle class, I have to go Rome Odunze. I feel ever since really Odell Beckham Jr. in his prime, and we did a couple of years back. Ever since that, I think this football team has needed a playmaker like Rome Odunze. You talk about a guy who can be your number one receiver for the next 10 years. I think you add that. Now you have Daniel Jones. He's going to be a year coming off of the injury. You look at all of those things there. Will Evan Neal develop? A lot of different questions, but now you don't have to question having a guy who can get you a first down when you need it. Right here for the Tennessee Titans, I got Joe Alt. And just to give you a couple of reasons why I have Joe Alt, the Tennessee Titans gave up the fourth most sacks in 2023. Andre Dillard had a 51% blocking grade on 562 snaps per PFF. You look at the other side, Dylan Radunes, not much better. But who'd you draft last year with the number 11 selection? You drafted Peter Skoronski. Not only did you bring in Brian Callahan, former Bengals offensive coordinator, you brought in his father as the offensive line coach, Bill Callahan. Bill Callahan has worked with the Dallas Cowboys. He's worked with some other NFL teams, but he's most recently worked with the Cleveland Browns. He's been their offensive line coach since 2020. And when you think about that Cleveland Browns offensive line, you have to say, okay, DeJuan Jones, Jedrick Willis, tackle after tackle after tackle that got hurt for that football team. They were on their fourth quarterback. And now we say, okay, how were they able to do it? How were they able to run the football with Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt? How were they able to stay in the mix of things and win football games and come into the playoffs versus the Houston Texans as the fifth seed? It was because of the offensive line, Wyatt Teller, Joel Bettino. Bill Callahan is a guy who's worked with a lot of great offensive linemen and he knows how to build an offensive line. The reason that I'm saying that is because Joe Alt, I feel, is the best tackle, but my tackle with the highest upside is Olu Fashanu. And when you talk about a tackle with upside, you talk about Bill Callahan, who's known to work with these guys, has a proven track record of building offensive linemen up. I wouldn't be surprised if they take him right there. I think that's just a sentiment that I wanted to point out and let you guys know. Now, number 8. Like I said, when you talk about this quarterback market, I delegated Justin Fields to this football team. So right here, I think I'm going edge. And my number 1 rated edge in this draft is Dallas Turner. I'm really excited to see how Laiatu Latu performs at the draft combine. I think he can work his way back into this conversation because from a finesse standpoint, he's kind of flawless. You talk about a guy who has the pass rush counters, who knows how to attack every attack point, who knows how to win with finesse and moves, hand fighting. But when you talk about Dallas Turner, I'm looking at a more explosive guy, a guy who can bend around the edge. You talk about that drill where you want to get around the hoop, make sure your hands touching the ground. That's that type of guy who can do those things. And really in the run game, he makes explosive plays in the run game. We're going to talk about another edge in Jared Verse, who I think brings more of a powerful aspect to the pass rush. But when you talk about kind of a combination of bend, really elite raw athleticism, and mixing in some finesse in there, that's Dallas Turner for me. And he goes to a team that really could use some help on the edge. Like I said, Grady Jarrett will be back. Calais Campbell, he's a veteran on that team. And you got some good guys in the back end. So you feel really good about this defense, have the playmakers on offense, and now you have Justin Fields in this mock draft. And I think for a lot of people, one thing I do want to say, when you look at the quarterback situation, I want to bring in a quote that I have from new offensive coordinator Zach Robinson, because he's worked under Sean McVay. When you think about Sean McVay, you also kind of think about Shanahan. You think about Matt LaFleur. West Coast offense, a lot of motion, quick game. Now, Justin Fields, a lot of people feel, and it's true, he may not be the most ideal guy for the new offensive coordinator in Zach Robinson. But one thing that he had to say, whether it's a pocket guy, whether it's a guy that can move around a little bit, we're just looking for the best guy that we can do. Robinson said, certainly we know the guys that are here. We're evaluating everybody. So Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ritter, we're looking at those guys. But the key thing to focus on, that Zach Robinson said, new offensive coordinator, we just want the best guy that we can do. And I think when you talk about innovative offensive minds in the game of football now as it's modernized, of course you want the quick game. You want all of the motion. You want to do the play action. You want to take your shot when you can. But I think adding some of those things, the design run game, letting Justin Fields get on the move, sprint outs, boots, those types of plays, even naked concepts, you have to play to kind of what you have a little bit while still keeping some of those West Coast implications in your offense. I have confidence in Zach Robinson. He's working on a great offensive mind. He's been there for a minute. So I think with this, he can evolve along with Justin Fields and turn him into his guy. Now, number 9, right here, you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, Chicago Bears. For us, I mean, you think back to last year, some of the selections that were made, traded the number 1 overall pick, traded down, got Darnell Wright, got Tyreek Stevenson in the second round. For me, when I look at some of the team needs, and when I'm thinking about, okay, wide receiver 2 is a need for me right here. Malik Nabers is off of the board. Rome Odunze is off of the board. And I think as we get closer to draft day, the possibility of this is looking for real. So you say with a guy, you just extended Cole Kmet last year, and you look at some of these options on the board. I don't think corner is a need. Of course, we can say edge is a need. Jared Verse is still on the board. But I really feel like when value meets player right here, and value kind of aligns with need. Now, for Shane Waldron, he's going to have to say, okay, I have to evolve a little bit. I don't have my ideal perimeter XZ receiver like Rome Odunze or Malik Nabers, or just a guy who can get in the slot like Nabers can. But I have to think, how can I implement a guy? And I'm going to take Brock Bowers, because I think if you play into his skill set along with Cole Kmet, you're looking at possibly one of the most deadliest uses of 12 personnel in the NFL. And then you look in the backfield, Roshan Johnson, Khalil Herbert on the perimeter. Like I said, You have DJ Moore. Still going to have to add a wide receiver too, but I think instead of getting a guy like Nabers or a Dunze, you're looking at some of the depth in this class. And I think of a lot of receivers. You're looking at Ladd, some of those other guys, Adani, if he's still there. You're looking at Jalen Polk. A lot of different options there at receiver. I think this is a really good receiver class, but we're just going to see how it pans out. This is a one-round mock draft, but I think if this happens, you got to get Brock Bowers here for me. Some other positions that I would think about, like I said, Jared Verse. If you like Latu enough, you could get him there, add to the edge opposite Montez Sweat. This is a defensive-led team, but for me, I'm getting my best player on the board, and that's Brock Bowers. Now, number 10, going Olu Fashanu for the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old. This is a football team, great defense, and they want to win now. And for me, the only two picks I would make at this selection is either Olu Fashanu, or if they like Talisa Fuaga a little bit more, go ahead and get that pick. Those are the only two players that I look at for this spot, and I think that's remained consistent through every time I've looked at the mock draft for me. Now, you have to think, okay, Mekhi Becton struggled in 2023. What position, where do you put him? Left, right, Elijah Vera Tucker. He is going to be back healthy. You think about Laken Tomlinson, Connor McGovern at the center position, drafted Joe Tippmann last year. A couple of different things that you could do, but I think Olu gives you the opportunity to put out your best five. That's what some of these teams are leaning on. The traditional left tackle, right tackle, left guard, right guard, teams are moving a little bit away from that depending on the comfortability of the player. If Mekhi Becton is comfortable with it, now he's a guy who played right tackle before. So, of course, he could be comfortable with it. You have Elijah Vera Tucker. He wears a lot of different hats, can play a lot of different positions. So, I think best five is really the approach right here. And I like Olu right there. Now, number 11, Vikings. Like I said, when you think, okay, you retain Kirk Cousins at the quarterback position, Danielle Hunter, probably along with Josh Allen, the highest edge on the free agent market. Would you be able to retain both of those guys? And I think it's going to be a hard conversation when you talk about it from a financial aspect. So, although I think when I look at Byron Murphy Jr., a Caleb Evans, Andrew Booth out of Clemson, Mekhi Blackman out of LSU, I feel like for Brian Flores, he's a blitz-heavy defensive coordinator. He likes to play a lot of man coverage, a lot of exotic coverages. He'll run cover 6, he'll run cover 8, a lot of different things. But when I'm looking at, okay, Marcus Davenport, he's also set for free agency. DJ Wonham, he's set for free agency. I'm looking at the edge, and I think you could be there with a bare cupboard. So for me, I take my second-rated edge here, and that's Jared Verse. Terrion Arnold is a viable option right here. Quinion Mitchell, if he shoots up the board after a great combine, I think he has great film. He's a ball hawk, has a lot of production there. Something you have to keep your eye on. Now, number 12. The Denver Broncos, like I said, they released Russell Wilson. It's going to happen regardless of any other quarterback destination. Russell Wilson would not be on the Broncos. They have no second-round pick in this year's draft. They'll be moving forward with a ton of dead cap space after moving off of Russell Wilson, and their roster quarterbacks are Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci. Now, for me, obviously your answer for quarterback is not on the team right now. I think when you have no second-round pick, you're forced into this position. So it comes down to the conversation of who is your favorite quarterback. Bo Nix, a guy who I think has a very high floor, but we talk about the ceiling with the arm talent. Now, for me, I think when you talk about processing defenses pre and post snap, Bo Nix is really your guy. He's not going to push the football down the field a lot. He's not going to throw outside the hashes down the field 50 yards a lot. But when we talk about the quick game, that West Coast offense, and you look at why Russell Wilson and Sean Payton weren't really a stylistical fit. They didn't have the same philosophy. Russell Wilson wants to extend the play. He wants to get out of the pocket. And for Bo Nix, he's a guy who's going to say, okay, give me my West Coast system. Give me my weapons. Let me understand what it is. I'm going to be the film hawk. I'm going to understand everything on the football field. I'm going to understand my hots. As long as you have options for me there, I'm going to know which one is best. If it's a hot route, we have a blitzer. I'm turning my head. I'm letting the ball go. If it's a slant route, now I'm understanding zone coverage, how that's playing out. I'm letting the football go. Will Bo Nix ever be a top 5 to 10 quarterback? That's a hard-based question. But when you talk about a guy who I think for Sean Payton, and it is that important to him. That's one thing I want to say, that when you look at Michael Penix Jr., you might think about the arm talent and say, okay, That may be the guy I want. How he throws the deep ball, how he gets into the quick game. Although I don't think he's the processor that Bo Nix is, he doesn't extend plays nearly as good as Bo Nix, but also the wild card. JJ McCarthy in this thing. Will Sean Payton fall in love with JJ McCarthy? This is a conversation that has to be had. We're looking at these quarterbacks because we say, okay, last year, the offense got a bit stagnant. It was a bit predictable at times. Run, play action on third down, a lot of different things like that. And it's not because some of it was on Russell Wilson, but really, Sean Payton wanted to dictate everything that Russell Wilson did. And I think if you have Bo Nix, a guy who I feel is very comfortable within the first read, who can process defenses at a high level based on the guys left on the board, I feel that it is the best fit for a guy like Sean Payton. We look at the offense that he ran with Oregon. Troy Franklin is his number one receiver. He's going to get into the screen game. He's going to run the play action. He's going to run the West Coast system. If you give him all of that motion and let him see, okay, is it man or zone? Where's my safety rotating from? Bo Nix is the guy who I feel is the best quarterback for this spot. Some people are going to have late first grades on him. Some people are going to have second round grades on him. But I think when fit matches up with the evaluation of a player and you have a need there, you're not going to be able to get him elsewhere. I think Bo Nix moves up the board and Sean Payton takes his guy. When we talk about number 13 and we look at the NFL free agent market, how I've delegated it, there's no Russell Wilson, there's no Kirk Cousins, there's no Baker Mayfield, no Justin Fields. You're looking at possibly Ryan Tannehill, Sam Darnold. I think that for me, as long as I've been looking at this position, I was kind of looking at Byron Murphy. I was also looking at Johnny Newton, Jerzon Newton for this team at this position. When you talk about, okay, Malcolm Kuntz, Tyree Wilson, he's going to be fully a year removed off of the injury. You still have Max Crosby. That was kind of where I was looking at this. And you also could go offensive line. But now I think you're kind of prompted into this spot with all of the free agent quarterbacks going. Aiden O'Connell, is he the answer? I don't feel he's the long-term answer. Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't feel he's the long-term answer. So now, okay, when you think about it, also, Jimmy Garoppolo got suspended for the first few games. So now, still a quarterback on the board, and you have the question once again with JJ McCarthy. The sample size. How sold will a team be? When you think about Jim Harbaugh, you think about the philosophy there, he just didn't have as many opportunities to put the football through the air, referring to JJ McCarthy. Now, when you look at some of those drop back opportunities, and I looked at a lot of games with just his drop backs. I didn't want to see, okay, the run, a lot of different things. I looked at just the drop backs. And you look at that and say, this is a guy who has arm talent. He's younger than Michael Penix. Michael Penix is a 6-year guy. When you're looking at JJ McCarthy, he's still in his early 20s. So now, adding that, even though Michael Penix has a better arm, JJ McCarthy still has a lively arm. He has velocity to throw across the middle of the football field between linebackers, behind linebackers. You say, okay, didn't throw outside the hash a lot. That wasn't required a lot within his offense. Had Roman Wilson. He's kind of that do-it-all guy, worked a lot inside the slot. He was a guy there as a security blanket for a guy like JJ McCarthy. Now, I'm thinking when you talk about play action, getting the quarterback on the move, you can add him into your run game. He's not the runner that I look at Caleb Williams or Jayden McDaniels, but he's still a very viable option within the run game, can multiply a run game a little bit. And just the biggest thing is, I don't know if he's there yet and ready to start right now. From day one, when you talk about processing, being safe with the football, and you go back and watch some of those dropbacks, he's just not the safest guy with the football. He did put the football in harm's way. And that's why when you say Jim Harbaugh, we're going to lean on Blake Corum. We're going to lean on Donovan Edwards. They're in the backfield along with the offensive line and a great defense on the other side of the ball. That was how they win football games. And sometimes when it came down to third down, then J.J. McCarthy would step up. But for me, like I said, when I go back to Michael Penix Jr. with the arm talent, with the deep ball accuracy, what he can do in the quick game, doesn't throw across the middle as much. And you say, is that a question that we have? Is that a concern? Taking pace off of the football, knowing, okay, if this is a drag route, if it's a dig route, let me put it on my receiver. Let him run a little bit. If it's a dig route, I don't want to put it on his back shoulder, make him sit down with the football. We have to understand, okay, a lot of different things. And that was kind of one thing we said with Anthony Richardson. Pace on the football, knowing how to switch up the pace when throwing the football. Just a question there, but for me, I really like Michael Penix right now. I think day one, he could be a starting guy for you. And you look at some of those weapons there. Trey Tucker, Devontae Adams. What would they do with Josh Jacobs? That's still a question for this football team. But outside of that, I say, okay, Jacoby Myers. Colton Miller is your left tackle. I like this move for the Raiders, and I think they're kind of pushed into this move based on how I delegated those free agent quarterbacks. Now, number 14. For me, this is kind of a questionable one because I say, okay, the Saints were 28th in sacks per game in 2023. They drafted Brian Bazee in the first round last year. They drafted Isaiah Foskey. He's set to develop some more. Carl Grandison had a breakout year, 8.5 sacks, but he's set for free agency. When you think of New Orleans Saints and you think of pass rush, the guy who's been the franchise on the defensive end, that's Cameron Jordan. He's now 34 years old. So with that, I've come to the question, do I take my second rated edge in Jared Verse? Could I go Latu right here? But when I come back to it, I think, okay, Andreas Pete, Trevor Penning, and then you look at the right side, Ryan Ramchick. I think this has to be a Talisa Fuaga spot. I look at some of the work that he did in the Senior Bowl, was the best offensive lineman to me that I saw out of all of them at the Senior Bowl, put in great work there. You look at the film there, he's a nasty blocker in the run and passing game. Now, sometimes in the passing game, that can be the best of them when we talk about balance and hand placement. But for me, I really like Talisa Fuaga. Some teams project them to go inside, and for this team, if you think about it, you say, okay, I'm probably going to try him at tackle. But if I have to kick him inside, I still get a guy who has Pro Bowl potential, even getting up to all potential. He's one of my favorite tackles in this class. I see him as a tackle. Some people see him as a guard. But for this team, I think they need to get the best offensive lineman on the board. And for me, that's Talisa Fuaga. Now, number 15. This is where my number one corner comes off of the board. And I was thinking about it. I said, okay, they were ranked number 17th in pass defense in 2023, but it was not because of great cornerback play. Kenny Moore is by far the best player in the secondary, and I look at him as kind of that nickel corner. He can do some things on the outside for you, but really, he's a guy that when you put him in a nickel, he's just a stud. He can blitz for you, do a lot of different things, and wear some different hats. Now, outside, Julius Brents. When Julius Brents was hurt, you kind of got to see the depth at the cornerback position on this football team. And when you saw it, it was not pretty. So for me, it came down to really my top three corners: Terry and Arnold, Nate Wiggins, or Quinion Mitchell. Now, some people, and I think after the combine, there's going to be a better conversation about Cooper DeJean. I'm very high on Cooper DeJean. When I look at the film, a lot of people are saying versatility, but for me, I think you could still try him at outside corner. I don't see a guy who has to be forced into the nickel or he has to be forced to transition into safety. He's a very good corner, can have production on the football, can play in the run game. He's the best run defending corner in this draft, along with guys like Ennis Rakestraw, but that's neither here nor there. I watched some more film of Terry Arnold, and I was just blown away. And I think when talking about Terry Arnold, there were a couple of things that really solidify him right now as my cornerback one. Because when you watch some of the film, and I really like guys, like I said, DeJean, Nate Wiggins, and Quinion Mitchell. But for Terry Arnold, willingness to come up and make tackles in the run game. Although he missed some tackles, he's not afraid to come up and make tackles on the perimeter. Off man coverage, press man coverage, off zone coverage, press zone coverage. He checks those boxes, has great route recognition, understanding what his role is in the coverage and how route concepts play out. But when you talk about man coverage and even some zone concepts, when he transitions from out of phase to in phase, out of phase, you're playing through the hips and you're playing through the hands. In phase, now you can play through the ball a little bit. So when he transitioned from that and said, okay, Malik Nabers, this is a key route that he had, a key rep that he had. Malik Nabers separated on the route. Terry Arnold transitioned from out of phase, came back in phase, and really close the space. How can you close space in those short areas to break on the football? There are some routes where you say, okay, this receiver, he looks open, but Terry Arnold comes back in the frame and he makes the play and breaks up the pass. Those are the little things that I look at. I think this is a corner who will transition seamlessly to the NFL. You play in the secondary for Nick Saban, I'm trusting you and I'm booking that one. Now, talking about number 16 for the Seahawks, I understand some people may make the correlation. Mike McDonald coached in the gym, and John Harbaugh did some work for Michigan as the defensive coordinator, did some work for the Baltimore Ravens as defensive coordinator, and he got to see J.J. McCarthy up close and personal. I don't think that connection there, although the philosophy kind of remains the same, and I think it'll be the same for this football team. Play good defense, hard edges, have linebackers who can stop the run and cover, and you look offensively, you want to build through the trenches, and you want to have a run game. You have Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet paired with some of those guys like JSN, Tyler Lockett, and DK Metcalf. I think you have two bookend tackles. But one thing I charted down, Damian Lewis, Evan Brown, Phil Haynes, all interior offensive linemen, starting offensive interior linemen, set for free agency. Like I said, when you look at Charles Cross and Abe Lucas, I feel confident and comfortable there. They brought in Ryan Grubb, former Washington offensive coordinator. He was about to go to Alabama with the bar, but then he came back, stayed in Washington. Now he's Seattle's offensive coordinator. And I think for a team who's strapped in cap space, what is the best way to kind of flip this thing on its head and turn it around? They were 27th in rushing in 2023. Mike McDonald is not going to want that type of football team. I think right here for me, you get one of the, and there's two players that you could go here for me. Because Michael Penix Jr., I think he would be a good fit here. He's not on the board if you want to take the quarterback route. Jackson Powers Johnson, comfortably the best center in this draft. But do you have the conversation between he and another guy that I like that can transition inside and Troy Fontenot? Troy Fontenot or Jackson Powers Johnson? Very, very tough discussion when we talk about it right here. But I think for me, I feel a little more confident about Jackson Powers Johnson with the size, the athleticism. There isn't a block that he can't make in the run game, in the passing game. You add an anchor like that with those bookend tackles, that's going to help Geno Smith. That's going to help Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, and Mike McDonald, who wants to run the football, keep his defense fresh, go out there and get stops and win that way. Now, for me, this is kind of a pick that I've been looking at for a long time. I think for the Jacksonville Jaguars, you do whatever you can to retain Josh Allen. And with that being said, some guys on the free agency market for this football team won't come back. And when you can kind of upgrade horizontally, my fit right here is Brian Thomas Jr. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. Because when I look at some of the receivers in this draft, a guy who's shooting up draft boards, a guy who I look at the film alongside Malik Nabers, had Jayden Daniels throwing them beautiful deep balls. That's something I talk about with Jayden Daniels, throwing that deep ball with really the accuracy and the touch down the football field. But for Brian Thomas Jr., now you say, okay, I'm the deep threat. Christian Kirk's going to work out of the slot. We know that. Zay Jones can work at the Z or the X. Really would put Brian Thomas at the X, or you could put him inside and do some different things there. Neither here nor there. Now, you say when we do that, Evan Ingram, he's our receiving tight end. Drafted Brenton Strange. He's another tight end who can do some different things. You feel very good about that, and you still have Parker Washington, who got drafted last year. For me, this is kind of one of the easy ones. Unless you wanted to go offensive line or corner, I wouldn't really knock it out right now. Opportunity lines up with the need. Very good player. Going to be a team need because I foresee this team losing out on Calvin Ridley to bring back Josh Allen. Just one thing that I have right there for this football team, and I think it's going to help Trevor Lawrence. Please draft offensive lineman in the second round. Now, for the Cincinnati Bengals, I got to go J.C. Latham. One of my better tackles in this class, huge tackle. And you think about Orlando Brown Jr., he's going to be the left tackle for this football team. I feel confident in saying that. J.C. Latham, right tackle at Alabama, going to be a right tackle for this football team. Jonah Williams is set to hit free agency. And I think right here, not only do you have the opportunity to really kind of upgrade, but you protect your asset in Joe Burrow. What is Joe Burrow coming off of? The wrist injury. Missed the back half of the season in 2023. Now we say, okay, Orlando Brown Jr., and you paid him to play left tackle. Wants to carry after the legacy of his father, who was a left tackle in the NFL. I feel good about that. Now you say, T. Higgins, tag him, sign him, whatever you want to do there long term. Jamar Chase on one side. What is the plan with Joe Mixon in the backfield? You still have Chase Brown, who you drafted out of Illinois. So there's a couple of options there when you look at the weaponry. But nothing is more important than protecting the biggest asset on this team, and that's Joe Burrow, getting a tackle, bringing him into this football team. But also, there's another possibility and something I want to talk about because, like I said, if they keep a guy like Jonah Williams, now you go to that defensive side. Byron Murphy, Jerzon Newton, or Johnny Newton, as some people may call him. That's the other thing I was looking at for this pick. But right here, I had you getting one of those tackles. You can go Mims if you like him more. You can go Guyton if you like him more. But I like J.C. Latham is my fourth tackle in this class, so I took him right here for Cincinnati. Now, number 19, very, very interesting pick for this football team. I think you could easily go corner here because the Rams ranked 21st in pass defense in 2023. The current corners, you're talking about, okay, we're bringing out Witherspoon, Darian Kendrick, Kobe Durant. And while I think viable corners, you want that number one guy that allows some of those other corners to play to their strengths and allows you to match up better with certain personnel. You look at Queen Williams still on the board. You look at Cooper DeJean still on the board. You look at even Nate Wiggins still on the board. But for me, I talk about the current edge depth for this football team. With a new defensive coordinator in Chris Shula, served under Raheem Morris in 2023. Now, I'm thinking pass rush maybe a little bit more important. And I've talked about the depth of this draft class when we talk about, okay, should I take tackle here because I can get it a little bit later? Should I take corner here because I can get it a little bit later? And I think there's going to be a run on really tackles and corners in this draft. But right here, I have to stop it. And I have to say pause for a little bit and take Laiatula 2 as a homecoming event. The Rams had 41 sacks in 2023, only more than the Jacksonville Jaguars, Washington Commanders, and New England Patriots. Byron Young on the edge, Michael Hoyt on the edge, who they really love, Jonah Williams on the edge. I think you add a guy like Laiatula 2, and you feel really good about that. Now you got, okay, Kobe Turner on the inside. He's going to hand fight. He's going to pass rush. Aaron Donald, Byron Young on one edge, Laiatula 2 on one edge. Do what you can at corner, even in some of those other rounds or in free agency, picking up a veteran. Those are my options right there, and I really like that. Now, for me right here, this could also be a corner spot. And this is just the question that you have to have when you talk about some of these football teams. You got Kool-Aid on the board. You got Wiggins and Quinion Mitchell on the board. But I think for some teams, you have to say, okay, do we take the corner or the offensive lineman? And these are two positions which I really like in this class. But I have to think about the Pittsburgh Steelers for a little bit. You bring in Russell Wilson, who I delegated to this football team in this class. If you think about Dan Moore at left tackle, Roger Jones played right tackle last year, although he played left at the University of Georgia. Could you get a guy like Mims who's still on the board, like Guyton who's still on the board, play them at the right tackle position, move Roger Jones to the left tackle? That's something you could do. But when I look at this football team, Isaac Seumalo, I look at the right guard position, James Daniels, and I feel kind of comfortable with a guy like James Daniels, like Isaac Seumalo as my interior guards. Jackson Powers Johnson is off the board. Now I'm saying, okay, what is the conversation about some of these tackles? Amarius Mims, Tyler Guyton. When you talk about those true tackles, that may be the fit here, and then you move Broderick Jones with the athleticism that he has, the pass blocking prowess that he has. He's going to be in his second year. He's going to develop and get better. You just want to get that edge protection for a guy like Russell Wilson. And not only you're bringing Arthur Smith as the new offensive coordinator, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Calvin Austin, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren. I think looking at this team, this is leaning more and more towards an offensive pick because for the past few years, defense has been solid for this football team, although they could get help at corner in the secondary. But I think offensively, it has to be a turn this year in a more balanced football team. So with that being said, I'm going to take Mims off of the board. Really like him at tackle there. Now, for number 21, and this isn't going to take too much time. Isaiah Wynn, Robert Hunt, Connor Williams, all set for free agency. And what are they again? Kind of similar to the Seattle Seahawks, interior offensive linemen. Now, you say, okay, offensive line for this team, despite only allowing 59 quarterback hits and 31 sacks in 2023. And they started 12 different offensive line combinations. Only the Jets had more, but still, all signs are points toward offensive linemen. When you look at a team who's strapped for cap space, they currently rank 30th per spot track, and even Austin Jackson, their right tackle right now, he has guard experience. Back in 2021, he played 900 snaps at left guard, although they extended him as their right tackle. Teron Armstead is the left tackle. For me right here, I think a couple of options. If you want to kick Austin Jackson inside if you feel confident about that there. You can go Tyler Guyton. You can go Taylor Morgan. But for me, when I'm looking at a guy who's on the board and has some of that flexibility that I talk about at the tackle position, I have to go Troy Fontenot for the Miami Dolphins. A lot of different hats that we talk about wearing. So I feel good about this pick right here. Now, you still got some very good corners on the board. And this is where it gets tricky because I look at a guy in Nate Wiggins, perimeter corner, but then you can also have a guy in Cooper DeJean where we say, okay, do we want to still keep Bradbury on the outside, upgrade from Maddox in the slot with a guy like Cooper DeJean who can do some versatile things, still have big play slate, or do you want to just upgrade from James Bradbury, put a guy like Nate Wiggins or Kool-Aid out there on the perimeter? It's a couple of different things that I think we have to talk about. I think this will ultimately be Nate Wiggins for this football team because when I think about Vic Fangio, he's their new defensive coordinator. They had Matt Patricia, they had Son Desai. It just didn't work. I've seen offensive line for this team. I don't think they'll go there because Cam Jurgens was Jason Kelsey's heir apparent. He picked Cam Jurgens as the guy to come after him. He's going to be the center for that football team. They drafted Tyler Steen out of Alabama in the 4th round last year. He's going to be another guy that they play on the offensive line. Now, for Lane Johnson, I think there has to be a replacement there. But Tyler Steen was a tackle in football when he played for Alabama. So maybe they go offensive line, but I don't think it's a need here. I don't see the pick there. Now, getting back to Vic Fangio, he's going to play those exotic coverages. He's going to bring exotic pressures. He's going to mix it up, disguise some things. And I look at Bradbury, now you say, okay, he struggled. Allowed 61 catches for 797 yards and 10 touchdowns on a 60.4 completion percentage allowed in 2023. Not good cornerback play at all. And then beyond that, now you have, okay, Kelly Ringo out of the University of Georgia and Eli Ricks out of Alabama. Young guys. I think even with Nate Wiggins, he's more polished at this point in his career, although he's going to be a rookie. I'm making this selection for this football team right here, and I think it's going to be a corner. Now, for me right here, in this, and really kind of in this selection, I don't know that Byron Murphy actually falls this low because he's probably one of the better players. And after this combine, he's going to shoot up draft boards. He's kind of that traditional 3-tech, 6'2", 295 up to 300, 305, 310, who's going to get after the quarterback. And really watching the film on him, when you think of kind of that gap shooting 3-tech, you would think, okay, he's not good in the run game, but he has a dead leg. He can anchor down at that 3-tech position. He also has a little bit of versatility to do different things. One thing I saw on film with him, because he lined up aside Tavondre Sweat, another interior guy who's going to go high in this draft. When you talk about Byron Murphy as a looper and a stunt guy, somebody who can loop outside, that was really his bread and butter. D'Amico Ryans, we think about that exotic defense over there in San Francisco. We think about this defense here. Sheldon Rankins, Jonathan Gennard are set to hit free agency. I think in this scenario, you could bring back Sheldon Rankins if the money is there, but you have to bring back Jonathan Gennard, opposite Will Anderson Jr., led the league in pressures as a rookie for the rookies. Now, I'm adding a guy like Byron Murphy, who I think is right there with Johnny Newton. For me, Byron Murphy, it comes down to the pass rushing prowess. And really with Johnny Newton, he's a great pass rusher as well. Give you some things in the run game as well. But I was blown away with Byron Murphy when I watched that tape. So that's what I have right there when I talk about a guy who can wear so many hats and get after the quarterback alongside Will Anderson Jr. Now, Dallas Cowboys, very, very interesting one. And I think this is a great roster despite some of the recent shortcomings. Terrence Steele really struggled in the past year, and it was highlighted throughout different games. You look at the Eagles game, and the late drive where Dak Prescott got sacked. Hassan Reddick versus Terrence Steele beat him immediately off of the edge. You look at some of those playoff games, Terrence Steele at that right tackle position, not winning his one-on-one reps in the pass rush. 52.3 blocking grade per PFF, which was the second lowest of his career other than his rookie year. He allowed 8 sacks, 14 quarterback hits, and 34 hurries with 7 penalties allowed. Now, when I'm thinking about that, I have to say, okay, this is a guy who's removed off of an ACL injury in 2022. But a couple of different options here because I'm looking at the board and I have to say, okay, I like what they have at corner. Bland is going to be there. Trevon Diggs is set to come back off of the ACL injury. Now, receiver could be a very, very viable option when we talk about some of these guys. Keon Coleman, we're looking at Adonai Mitchell, a guy who's been compared to CeeDee Lamb. But now I have to think, I'm not going defensive tackle. And it was really weird to me when I heard some of the things about how they made Mozzie Smith play. Because when Mozzie Smith came in there, I expected him to be the guy that was kind of a supercharged Jonathan Hankins for that football team. You talk about a zero tech, a two gapping nose tackle, but they ask him to drop weight. Dallas Cowboys fans down below in the comments, let me know what's going on with that one because I just don't understand that. Leighton Vander Esch, have to see what the future of his career is, hoping for a speedy recovery, whatever is going on with his injuries. But when I'm looking at the board right here and I'm talking about some of these players, you have to think, okay, Tyron Smith is set to be a free agent. You still have Zach Martin. You still have Tyler Smith. Very, very good offensive lineman. He could go to right tackle or he could play left tackle. He could even play inside. For me, I think you have to take an offensive lineman here, and that's where I go tackle with Tyler Guyton. Very, very athletic offensive lineman. He's not as polished as some of the other guys are in this class right now. But when you talk about the upside in a team, when Tyler Smith came out of the University of Tulsa, he was not as polished, but he had an edge to him. And we see that edge in the NFL now. One of the nastiest run blockers in the game of football, and he's a better pass blocker now. So they're going to develop a guy like Tyler Guyton, have him booking along with Tyler Smith, Zach Martin inside. Now you're looking at a unit. Even if you bring a guy like Tyron Smith back, with the injury history, you still have some stability at the tackle position. And you have to like what you have there, even upgrading a little bit from a guy like Terrence Steele. I think that's really good right there. Although they could also go receiver. Wouldn't be surprised if they do that. But I have this team taking the tackle. Now, getting into the next team, I'm going Cooper DeJean. I think when I look at the Green Bay Packers and kind of the versatility that Cooper DeJean can bring, when we talk about that, although I think if you want to put him at outside, you could do that. You're looking at Eric Stokes, you're looking at Valentine, and you're looking at Jair Alexander. Right there is your cornerback depth. Now they have a new defensive coordinator. It's going to be more based to a 4-3 than kind of what we've seen from Joe Barry with the 3-4 in the past. Now, Jeff Haley, former Boston College head coach, we still have some things that we want to see from him because we just haven't seen it for this football team just yet. First year defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. And I think adding Cooper DeJean, kind of solidifying whatever spot he plays. If it's replacing Eric Stokes on the outside, okay. Corey Valentine on the outside, okay. Now, Nixon, some of the other guys, Nixon is set free agency if they bring him back. He's a safety guy, but he can also play inside the nickel. Couple of different options there. And I think with Cooper DeJean, you're getting a guy who you know can play football, who you know is going to play in the run game, in a very, very good cover corner. I like this for this team right here. And he also can make ball production. Now, number 26, you wonder how a guy this talented ever falls this far. And I mean, it's just something you have to think. And I think for this football team, when I look at it, it's one of the trickier spots for me, but if Quinion Mitchell's on the board at this position, I really have to run up and make the card because you still have Jamel Dean, you have Carlton Davis, Christian Ozian, Zion McCollum, guys who stepped up and played at the corner position for this team. Shaquille Barrett's getting up in age. Yaya Diaby led the team in sacks out of Louisville. He had 7.5. Antoine Winfield Jr. was next with 6. This team ranked 28th in pass defense in 2023, and while they were ranked 8th in sacks per game, there just aren't really pure pass rushers on the football team. You got Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, and you're looking at that and saying, okay, Yaya Diaby, Tyron Shrinker, Shaquille Barrett, and I really would have liked to add an edge right here. But when I think about value, adding and aligning with this football team, I think corner is a position that you have to talk about. Antoine Winfield Jr. set free agency. Mike Evans set free agency. Devin White, Levante David. I delegated Baker Mayfield back to this football team, but they have some big-time names which are set for free agency. Quinion Mitchell, it's going to have to depend on how teams view these corners because some people are higher on Nate Wiggins than they are on Terrion Arnold. Some people are higher on Terrion Arnold than they are on Nate Wiggins and Quinion Mitchell, but some people are higher on Quinion Mitchell. When you look at a guy who had 4 interceptions in one game, who has a lot of ball production, and he can also cover for days, they're going to look at him higher. Wiggins, DeJean, or even Terry and Arnold. So it's just one of those things where you have to really analyze it, monitor it, and see how these corners come off of the board. Some Eagles fans will say, okay, I wanted Nate Wiggins right there. Some Bucks fans, they will say, okay, I wanted Nate Wiggins, and y'all could have had Quinion Mitchell. It's just a debate that we have to have, but I think we're going to see how these corners pan out. Really, the combine, Quinion Mitchell, he's going to run fast. Cooper DeJean, he's going to run good. So we're going to see how things play out. But right now, I think these corners, based on strictly value, are kind of better players than we talk about the 26th guy in the draft. But when we also talk about some of these tackles, some of these edges that come off of the board, it's just kind of how the board played out. Now, we get here to number 27 for the Arizona Cardinals. And I felt like for this pick, I really could take best player on the board approach. I'm looking at tackle. I'm looking at corner possibly. There are a couple of holes on this football team. You got Marvin Harrison Jr. with the 4th overall selection. Got Kyler Murray. Got some other guys there. Some people have even double dipped at receiver. I'm not going to double dip at receiver, but I think I want to look at the defensive side of the ball for Jonathan Gannon. What does he really emphasize? And when you look at a guy like Kool-Aid, you can go there and go corner, but I have to get Johnny Newton off of the board. I think what he adds, the pass rushing prowess on this football team, you talk about value. Very, very good player right there with Byron Murphy. So he's a guy, and you say, okay, how are these good players slipping? But I just think when you talk about some of the needs, some of how things align for these football teams, this is just something that panned out perfectly for you. Now, looking at the Buffalo Bills, interesting. I think I'm going to go Troy Franklin right here. This is a football team where I say, okay, Diggs, when you look at everything that's happened with Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen, a lot of people may be looking at some trade steam. Right now, I think it's cooling down. You're looking at possibly Stephon Diggs staying with this team in 2024. But even outside of that, I think you have to look at a 2 or a quasi 1 who can do a lot of things for you. Gabe Davis hasn't been a consistent performer as the number 2 receiver for this football team, and he's set for free agency. How can you upgrade horizontally, bring in a guy who's a deep threat, along with Stephon Diggs, who can wear a lot of different hats? Feel very good about Troy Franklin, who is exceptional at the University of Oregon. One of the true deep threats in this class, a burner who's going to get down the football field. You can even make the case when you talk about Brian Thomas Jr., because for Brian Thomas Jr., there wasn't a lot of versatility within his route tree. He's going to run a go or a hitch or a slant, something simple. So it's one question that you have to have with a guy like that. But I still think 2 very good deep threats in Brian Thomas Jr. to Jacksonville and Troy Franklin to Buffalo. Now, when I'm looking at the Detroit Lions, it has to be corner for me. And this one is going to be very tricky. I think when you look at Ennis Rakestraw, a guy who I would say Kool-Aid McKinstry is a better cover corner, but what he can bring in the run game, a nasty player, and even not the biggest corner, but he's one of those guys out of Missouri. You cut on that tape, he's a willing run defender. You talk about Cooper DeJean, some of the things I saw to Terry and Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw is in that same conversation. Now with the Detroit Lions, a team who we talked about all season. We've talked about it all season, a lot of different things that they've done. And I say, okay, 2 ways I would approach this. You're looking at some of those edge guys, Josh Allen, Danielle Hunter, big time targets when we talk about free agency. Can you get your hands on one of them? Now, in this mock draft, I said, okay, the Jacksonville Jaguars did everything they could to retain Josh Allen. I looked at the Minnesota Vikings. I had them drafting an edge. So will this be a football team that picks up a former division rival in the NFC North, gets Danielle Hunter? It's going to be 2 options, because a player that has really been linked to this football team, and deservedly so, a guy who did some good work in the Senior Bowl. Let's get him up right here. That's Darius Robinson. And I think one thing I'll say is, when you talk about him, Braylon Trice, even Chop Robinson, some of these players on the board at edge, good players. When I talk about Darius Robinson, I think really the fit and kind of the lure for him is he's a guy, former defensive tackle, who's now an edge player. And you say, what is the fit like that in a 4-3 scheme, 4-2-5 scheme like the Detroit Lions have? Because you see a guy in John Kaminsky. He's one of those bigger body guys, but they use him in stunts. They use him in loops. They could even play him inside if sometimes he wants to get into a 3. If he wants to play that heavy-handed 4 or the 4-eye. Darius Robinson kind of bringing that same thing, but a little more juiced up when you watch some of the tape and some of the film. Also a heavy-handed guy. But I think for me, It's really value aligns with need. You talk about Vildor. You talk about some of the other corners on this team, Cameron Sutton. I feel confident with taking a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry, who I think can cover for days, and I think this football team needs that. Now, right here, interesting. I just saw some things reading up on the Zay Flowers situation. I think he's gonna play this season. I haven't seen anything about a suspension regarding off the field issues. So now I say, okay, they have an electric receiver out there. They have guys, Devin Duvernay. They have a guy like Rashad Bateman, but it's still kind of that need to want to upgrade at the receiver position. For me, one thing I questioned was, okay, I see that. I see a Donnie Mitchell. I see some of these guys on the board, but I also think with Ronnie Stanley Jr., booking left tackle, when I look opposite that and I see Morgan Moses struggle, like I think he did in the playoffs against the Houston Texans, Jonathan Gennard, Will Anderson, they gave him a time. You look at that game against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now you say, okay, we got George Karlaftis, we got Charles Omenihu, guys who are giving this guy problems. So it's just one of those things where you have to say, okay, is the need for a receiver as big as kind of the need I feel for a tackle? And even with Justin Matabuke, can they retain him in free agency? A question you have to have. So I feel good about the corner position. It's listed as a need here, but I feel really good about that. Brandon Stevens, Marlon Humphrey. I like some of those guys there. I like the guys in the secondary. You already know Geno Stone, Kyle Hamilton can cover for days and do a lot of different things. It's kind of that question. We say, okay, do we want to get Jordan Morgan, another pure tackle? Graham Barton still on the board. I think ultimately, I kind of want to add some more juice for Lamar Jackson in this passing game, and also for Todd Monken as the offensive coordinator in his second year. I think I'm going to go to the receiver position. And you're looking at some of the guys here. Keon Coleman to the Baltimore Ravens. I think I'm going to go right there for the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens fan, let me know. Did you want Jordan Morgan? Did you want Graham Barton? Or did you want Keon Coleman? I think receiver, although I think tackle, but I also talked about it. You look at the depth at this tackle position. I think Keon Coleman, we're going to have to see how the combine looks, but I still bank on the upside with Keon Coleman. I look at some of the contested catchability, although for his size, you would expect it to be a little better. Not the best separator, and of course we see that. But don't get confused when you watch the film and you hear, okay, one person says Keon Coleman can't separate, and then it kind of rings on without actually clicking onto the Florida State film. I still bank on the upside, and I think could have had a better season, will be a good NFL player if he fixes some of the weaknesses and tweaks some of those things into his game. See, can't separate, watch the film for yourself, bank on your own analysis. I think he's still a very good receiver. Now, number 31, tricky one for me because I still see Rakestraw on the board. Like I said, I talked about some of these other players. You see a very good safety right there, linebacker. For me, Jatavian Sanders was a player who I heavily thought about. Those 12 personnel, 13 personnel sets, Christian McCaffrey in the back. Now you got Jatavian Sanders, electric tight end out of the University of Texas. Still have George Kittle, can be your inline guy. Jatavian can wear a lot of different hats. He's geared more towards a receiving tight end. Brandon Ayuk on the outside, although he's created a lot of steam lately, talking about some of those things on social media. But ultimately, I came down to it and said, okay, one of their guard positions is shored up. You have John Feliciano. You have him shored up at a guard position. You look at your right tackle position, you feel pretty solid about it. Left tackle, Trent Williams, but he's getting older. I think something I haven't even seen. But when I look more and more into this football team and I thought about what player I love, because I watched some more film on Graham Barton, like I said, played left tackle for Duke, did a lot of different things, but he's a guy who I like a lot more than some other linemen because of how he finishes. Nastiness within the run game. He's going to come off of the football. And the thing you'll see about him is the arms aren't that long. So one knock I'll have on him, although he's a very good player, we're going to talk about him. But this was a guy who would get off balance and lose his footing sometimes because you're looking at, okay, offensive linemen, now they're getting their hands on me, now they're getting leverage because of the arm length. But really, when you talk about it, he can get up under guys, hand placement was good, and coming off of the football, like I already aforementioned, this is a guy who I think can do a lot of different things, but you plug and play him. at that guard position, or you could try him at your right tackle position if you want to. I just think for this football team, getting a little bit older, I really like this guy. It's kind of that plug and play player for a team who I think at a lot of positions don't need the biggest upgrade. I think for me, Graham Barton was just a player that I fell in love with. I see him going in the first round of this NFL draft, and I clocked him right there to this football team. Now, for the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm going to go receiver, and I'm going to go with Donnie Mitchell. Very, very good player. Very, very good separator, in my opinion. And when I think about what he can do in this offense, when you talk about a guy like that who he brings you the separating skill, and you think about that West Coast offense, now, of course, I would have liked one of those deep threats if Brian Thomas Jr. falls, if really Troy Franklin falls, because for this team, I think that's something they could be looking for. You look at Rashee Rice and say, okay, he can do a lot of things after the catch. He works in the intermediate to short area, but what do they have to get deep? And I think with the Donnie Mitchell, you say, okay, we wanted a deep threat, but we're going to lean to kind of these separating guys with Travis Kelce, with Justin Watson, with what we have in the backfield, Pacheco, McKinnon. And now we're talking about a full-on West Coast. You talk about a quick game. You talk about Patrick Mahomes leaning into that quick game and understanding, get the football out quick. We're going to play underneath. You don't have to fear us. We have guys who can separate, and we're going to take the shots when they arise and when the opportunity presents itself. I really like this pick. Very, very good receiver. And we're going to also have to see, how do these receivers fall off the board? Some people may say Donnie Mitchell, because of the separator and the pure receiver he is, played for the University of Texas, what he did there. Some people may like him better than a guy like Troy Franklin. Some people may like him better than a guy like Keon Coleman. You talk about Nabers, Adunze, Harrison, some good receivers in this draft, but I have them taking a Donnie Mitchell at 32, and this is my mock draft. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Like I said, not the first job, not the first mock draft you'll see, not the last mock draft you'll see. We're not here to be perfect. We're here to talk football, and this is what we did today. Thank you for watching. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. That's going to do it for today. And now, we out.